performance where people do that kind of stuff, it ain't so slick on a live performance. You got a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes. And good morning, Irresistible. Good morning to those of you that are joining us on YouTube, our own YouTube channel. I sent out a link this morning on Facebook to direct people to the YouTube channel that we've started, so that if they're looking for us on Facebook, hopefully they see that and they'll be able to get back over and see see what the message is going to be. And those of you that are doing that, if you haven't already subscribed, go ahead and subscribe to that. And then when we set things up and say that we're going live at, I don't know, we kind of lied this morning, we're early, but when we go live, you'll get a notice that we're on there. So those of you who are here, if you would please, and maybe even those of you on the live stream, if you would just check in on your social media of choice and allow people to know where you're at and let them know what you're doing. It's great advertising for us. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of people that we've seen that have found us because of you guys. And as usual, the screen notes are on the Bible app. They're on the events page, and you can search for us by name, date, location if you're here. And again, another link went on this morning that'll take you directly to what we're going to be talking about, what's going to be, the notes are going to be behind me on the screen. And you have the ability, if you've never done that, you have the ability to be able to save that and add your own notes to it, your own comments, your own questions, so that you can study it later on. So, enough said. Our current series is Unbreakable, Living Supernaturally. To be able to do the things that we see being done throughout the Gospels in the Christian half of the Bible, and especially what we see quote-unquote ordinary people doing in the book of Acts, the things that so many times religion tells us have stopped because those people are all dead, I would challenge, because I believe we are called to be supernatural and to operate that way, and it's not God's fault if we're not. So, we got to blame somebody, let's blame religion. The early church knew the truth of signs and wonders and miracles. They saw them. And I don't know if it was an everyday occurrence or if it was a multiple times a day occurrence, but it was enough to get their attention when they were writing the history of the early church to tell us that people were doing signs and wonders and miracles. And they didn't get into detail. I don't think we need to limit the sign or the wonder or the miracle that God's going to do through us. As they lived supernaturally, they just began to expect it. They began to see things happen that way. And I honestly believe that that's our birthright as Christians, as believers, that we can expect supernatural things. Amen. And I'd like to see us get to the point where we're surprised if the miracles don't happen. And if I could be real blunt about the whole thing, I think the reason today's church doesn't see it is because they don't expect it. I've talked to a lot of people in different church backgrounds, and they will, they have this thing, this old saying, well, I sure hope it's true. I sure hope it happens. But you can tell from the tone of their voice that what they're saying is, it ain't happening. I don't expect it. I hope it does, but I don't expect it. So let's get into some of that with that in mind. Today is part one of a two-part message, and I call this, What Do You Expect? Or what do you expect? Or what do you expect? What do you expect? You can read it any way you want to, and it all is valid. How can we sync up with God's desire to work through us? How can we put ourselves in a position where God says, there's somebody that has faith, I can use them. I have somebody that needs the faith that they've got for healing, for finances, for whatever it happens to be. Is there some sort of a divine link that we can activate for the supernatural that be happening in our lives on a regular basis? Yes. The answer is yes. Thank you. The answer is yes. And it's called hope. It is just flat out biblical hope. Romans 8:24, the very first line in that, the Apostle Paul wrote, we were given this hope when we were saved. When we were saved, the negativity that is in us was supernaturally taken away. And we have to be like the people in Mark chapter 4 and go back and get it. Yeah. And too often we have people help us with that. But you have a supernatural hope that was given to you the moment you confess Jesus as your Savior. And we need to cultivate that. We need to keep ourselves in a place where when we say, I hope so, I am hoping for this, it's a positive thing. It's not a nice churchy language thing for saying, well, bless your heart, you're going to die. But I hope you don't. But I expect it. And that sounds cruel, but that's people too many times. There is only one way that you can take your faith and your hope and get them to work in a supernatural way, and that is to base them on something that is supernaturally 100% true all the time. Now, we call it the Bible. We call it the gospel. Jesus called it the good news. But that is supernaturally true all the time. And when we see things, when we see promises in that, it changes that negative, well, I hope so, into a positive. My hope is in God. My hope is in the Lord, and I don't think that He's going to let you down on this. Real, genuine biblical hope is a firm assurance. It's a firm expectation about things that haven't become reality yet. See, you can speak to things that maybe they're going to be resisting you. Maybe your finances are going to take a little bit of time. When Grace and I started out as Christians and pastors and teachers, we began this positive hope, this positive expectation, this positive confession over the finances that we absolutely had none of. And it wasn't long before we saw some of, and then we saw some more of, and that positive expectation just kept growing. And every time we saw God move, it got more positive, it got bigger, it got stronger inside of us. The outcome of our faith should always be a positive thing. Faith is positive. Worry is negative faith. Worry is believing Satan over God. But when your faith is positive, you can add that hope to it. And you begin to see supernatural things. I mean, I don't have anywhere close to enough time to tell you the supernatural things that we've seen. Here, I'll give you one. Look around. This is supernatural. This came about when we weren't even looking for it. And by the time the bank got done with us, we kept more than half of the money we were going to pay to them in our account. And now we just got to, I'll tell you guys this. I haven't talked to the board about it yet, but I'll tell all of you here. We've got a letter from a land acquisition expert who's looking at the back acreage. They don't want to buy it. They want to lease a piece of it and put a cell tower on it and pay us. And I'm looking at it like, did we not say when we moved in here that I expect this loan to be paid off more than twice as fast as it should be? Now, I haven't heard anything back from him. I agreed to the next step. I agreed to talk to him. The first shot across the bow was not quite what our payment is on the property, but he's close. And I'm looking at it like God is going to take this, and He's going to move this, and He's going to minister this, and it's going to change. And the guy even said, if Troy Township doesn't allow us to put a tower in, we have other methods. How would you like a second roof on your building? And we'll just put the equipment under that roof, and we'll take care of it. So there's a lot of stuff that God's going to do. And here we are innocently saying we're going to pay this off early and not having a clue how. And God's saying, I can use that faith. Have some supernatural. And why is that piece of property back there the only one in this part of the county that they're even considering? David mowed it. It looked good on the satellite, but when God gives you a promise, when God says this is yours, your hope will supernaturally take that and make it yours. So whatever promise you read, when you say, I believe that, Lord, that's mine, nothing can change that except for you. And here's something that I wrote down, and I found it in some of my notes from a completely different message, but it says we're supposed to live in a daily expectancy of miracles. Daily expectancy of miracles. They don't have to be parting the Red Sea miracles. They don't have to be an axe head floating miracles unless you drop your axe in the lake or the mower. Doesn't have to be something super fantastical. It can be a miracle. Hey, there's a parking place right in front of where I want to shop. Amen. Hey, I forgot to fill the tank, but I've been driving for a week on it. I have done that. I didn't actually forget to. I just didn't have money to. When we expect God to perform miracles on a consistent basis, and I mean expecting consistently, when we expect miracles consistently, when we expect them continuously, what's going to hold you back? I've told you the story of my eyesight for the last several years. The doctors have been reducing the power of my contacts. I'm down to the point now where I just have a reader in my right eye. There's no power to it. It's just got a reader. I went in Wednesday to have my eyes checked. It's been a year and a half. I kind of lost some time and didn't use a lot of my contacts after I injured my hand. And so I finally went in. I went in to buy more, and they said, you can't until you get your eyes examined. So went in, doctor looked at him. She just shook her head. She said, I'm going to take half the power out of that. She said, your left eye is improved in the year and a half to the point where the next step is you just have perfect vision. Now, guys, I'm almost 68 years old. How does that happen? God does. You expect a miracle. They told me a few years ago that I was developing a cataract in my left eye, and I told her then. I said, well, just watch next year. So the next time I went in, and even this time, for a 68-year-old man, your eyes, your corneas are completely clear. And I kind of looked at her and laughed. I said, don't happen that way very often, does it? And she said, I have never seen somebody your age. So I'm looking at, after I finally walked out, and wait a minute, a man my age, did she just use that again? Anyhow. Yeah. The sad fact of life for most Christians today, they don't look for miracles. They don't look for even small miracles. They don't look for God to do anything in their life. They think that they're just out here, all on their own. And nothing could be further from the truth. God's miracle power is all around us. You can see the woods starting to come to life. You can see lawns and flowers coming to life. That's just a miracle. We know how to make things grow. We just don't know why. We don't know how they do that. But they do, because God was in that. Anytime we're faced with a sickness, most of us, the first call is to the doctor or head to the urgent care or anything like that. And I'm not against doctors. I've used a lot of doctors the last couple of years. But I will tell you this, my first inclination is to speak to whatever's wrong and tell it to behave itself, to be gone, to be healed. And if it doesn't, I'm not afraid to use a doctor. I've been known to, I've had the reputation of saying that I'm teaching you to never go to doctors. I've never taught you that. But I've taught you there's one doctor that you can go to first. See what he does about it. And use doctors. There are some awesome Christian doctors out there. It is amazing the ones that God surrounded me with during this time while I've been recovering. And I'm thankful and grateful for every one of them. I freaked my one doctor out. I gave her a hug, told her I loved her, and she just kind of looked at me like, I never had anybody say that. And I said, I don't mean anything by it. I just love you. I love the fact that prayer is the first thing you do. And you're looking at trying to get me off all the rest of these medications and stuff. And I appreciate that. Instead of being like a lot of people I've heard where things just get added and added and added and added. I love Christian doctors, really do. Financial needs, I know a lot of people, the first thing they're going to do is call family, call friends, call a church they don't even go to. But they rarely even talk to God about it. What should I do about this, Lord? How can I come up with that? Should I even be trying to come up with that? Should I just let it go? Don't know. And see, honestly, God, like he did here, God can use your bank. There are Christians that work in banks. Did you know that? He can use your bank. He can use your family. He can use your friends. He can even use your work. Or he can just find you some money somewhere. Just be careful it's not on a table with a bunch of people making a drug deal in the back room. You know, or learn to run really fast if you do that. I mean, I'm just saying. How different would your faith walk be if we expected God to be our source first? How different would it be? What if we looked to him first? Why would he have given us so many promises in his word if he didn't mean them? I mean, we've read many, many times that God is true. Let every man be a liar, but God is true. Read that, seen that, understand that. But why, if that's true, why would he give us so many promises that we haven't seen? Is it possible we haven't been expecting them? Is it possible our butt got in the way? We read the promise, and then we say, but you don't know. But doesn't he? Doesn't he really? I believe that, and I've had several friends that have gone to several different, I hate to call it third world, but third world countries and overseas and South America, and they see miracles when they preach. I mean, there are people who are healed of deafness. There are people who have seen, lifeless limbs come back to life. Sight restored. Why don't we see that so much in the United States? I think we become too self-sufficient in our healthcare system and our government, and we expect somebody to take care of us, and it's not God. And I think that we as Christians, if we would learn that lesson and start looking to God, I'm not saying don't do what's necessary to make sure that you stay in your house, you keep your house, your kids are fed, and they got clothes. I'm not saying any of that, but I'm saying while you're doing that, you continue to believe God. Continue to believe his promises. You might just get surprised one day. You might just be surprised someday. Thinking about the systems and situations and problems that you've come up against. Do we actively in our spirit expect God to move and provide? Or do we get mad at God because we're facing it? God never promised not to have problems. Jesus said you're going to have problems. But then he said, but I've overcome the world, so be happy. And here's my question to you. Are you, irresistible, living in a daily expectation of miracles? Any size, any amount, any degree. Just a miracle. Our Heavenly Father not only wants us to expect them, but I think he wants us to expect to receive them. And I'm pretty sure he wants to give them to us. Now, matter of fact, let's just get down and dirty with the whole thing. If you get into Hebrews 11:6, it says it's impossible to please God without faith. I think that when we worry about situations we're facing, if you do better if you faced your problems instead of facing your problems. Let's faith it today. Just talk like Mike Tyson for half a day and just see what people say. I'm faithing all kinds of stuff today, Lord. And he would just look at you and say, yeah, do that. To live in the supernatural, we've got to raise our level of expectancy. We're going to have to get ourselves, we need to put ourselves in a place where we look at a problem, and before we open our Israelite pie hole and say something negative, think about the promise first and speak the promise. That degree of faith, when we do that first, God can change some amazing things. He can do some amazing things. And I'm not talking about this optimistic thing. I am not naturally an optimistic person. I have my entire life prepared like everything in the world is going to go wrong, but I expect everything to go right. But I'm prepared. And I think I told you when Pastor Grace, she looked at me after I traded trucks a couple of weeks ago. I was cleaning out the stuff in the one truck and getting ready to put it in the other truck. And she looked at me and she said, "Is there a reason that you're carrying 4 machetes, 3 axes, 2 shovels, 5 tarps, some bungee straps?" And I said, "Don't forget the knives in the door." And she said, "Why?" And I said, "I've seen zombie movies. It happens when you're not prepared." I had a bunch of young kids in in Pittsburgh a few years ago. I was working and doing inspections for houses for Nationwide Insurance, and I was in there, and I had a rental car, a little rental car that wouldn't, if you ever been to Pittsburgh, they got lots of hills, and that's where they put the parking spaces. And this little car, I had to get out and push it all the time with my foot on the gas, trying to get it up the hills. There was so much, it was crazy. So I parked this thing, and I'm looking at this big commercial building, and this gang of kids come up to me. And the guy says, "Give me your wallet." And I said, "Well, good luck with that. I said, ain't nothing in it." He looked at me and he said, "You don't have any money?" And I said, "No, I'm not carrying anything, money-wise." And he kind of looked at me and he says, "Is that your car over there?" And I said, "No, sir." He said, "I saw you drive up in." I said, "It's a rental. It's insured." And I just held out the keys. I said, "I do need to get my stuff out of it first." He said, "I'm taking all your stuff." And I said, "Well, now, see, we got a problem." And he looked at me real funny and he says, "What's the problem?" And I said, "You can't have my stuff. You can have the car. It's insured. But you can't have my stuff. I need my stuff." He said, "What would you do if we just started beating on you?" I said, "I got one quick request." And he said, "What's that?" And I said, "Give me a 3-step head start." He's a big kid. He just looked at me. He said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I want 3 steps toward that car, because if I get to that car," I said, "I'm going to wipe every one of you off the face of this planet." And he looked at me and he backed up and he says, "You're not scared?" And I said, "Well, I'm terrified, but I'm taking some of you with me." And they all backed off and went the other way, and I went and got in the car, and I called my boss, and I said, "I'm going home. I've had enough." And I looked at that later on, and I said, "Why would I do something like that? It was just stuff." I don't know. But I had faith that I was coming home. And there wasn't anything going to keep me from coming home to my wife and my family. And fear didn't even play into it. I was afraid after I got in the car and locked the doors. I kind of sat there and shook for a little bit and thought, "Man, that was the stupidest thing I've ever done in my whole life." Well, I've topped that since then. Anyhow, take a look at Hebrews 11:1. We know this. This is the Amplified version, Amplified Bible. "Now faith is the assurance, the confirmation, the title deed of the things that we do not see, the conviction of their reality, faith perceiving as real fact what is not revealed to your senses." That is faith. When you can't see it, that's when faith is involved. And it could be money, it could be healing, it could be a house of your own, it could be whatever. But faith creates this sense, this power through hope that allows God to use that and work it in a miracle, in a miraculous way. The God kind of faith isn't wishful thinking. It's not just optimism. It's not just feeling like everything will be okay. Faith is something substantial. It strengthens us and holds us up. So let me give you some true biblical hope. This is what Paul wrote, the rest of what Paul wrote to the Roman church. Romans 4, verse 18, the very first part of it, he says, even when there's no hope, or even when there's no reason for hope, Abraham kept hoping. You know the story of Abraham, I hope, from the Genesis. Believing that he would become the father of many nations. So Abraham, here's Abraham, 100 years old, still believing he's going to have a son. His wife's 90 years old. We'll get into that, 19. His faith did not weaken even though at about 100 years of age he figured his body was as good as dead, and so was Sarah's. So a 100-year-old dude, a 90-year-old wife, we're going to have a baby. What would you do with your parents if they came to you with that? We have a nice place for you guys to live. Just get in the back seat and I'll take you. Verse 20, Abraham never wavered in believing God's promise. And there's the key. There's the key. He was given that promise when he was 75 years old, and at 100 he still believed it. In fact, his faith grew stronger. And in this he brought glory to God. Verse 21, he was fully convinced that God is able to do whatever he promised. Think about that, fully convinced. There wasn't anything you could say or do to talk him out of God being true. Are we that way? Do we read the promises, but when bad stuff comes, we remind God how he fell short? Or do we look at him in our prayer and we say, Lord, I don't know how, but I believe you. You see how they're railing against me. You see how this situation is coming against me. But I have read your promises, and I believe your promise is true no matter what I see. How different would that prayer be other than, God, where are you? King James says that Abraham was fully persuaded, and I kind of like that. How fully persuaded are we that God's true? How fully persuaded are we that his promises are true? I had one guy tell me that, well, God doesn't talk to me like he does to Abraham. And I said, oh, yes, he does. Oh, yes, he talks to you even better. Because you have the word that you can read. So I'm going to cut things off here. I'm right at my time. And I want to cut it off. Next week is going to be a little bit more involved. We're going to take ourselves from where we're at with this fully persuaded thing, and we're going to work our way all the way to the end of a positive, miraculous expectation that God's got available for us if we'll just do it. So we'll stop with Romans 3:4. And I said this once before, if everybody else is a liar, God is true. You must believe that God is true. You must believe that he is love and that he loves you. He would never promise you something that he didn't expect to give you. His promises can be ignored. But if we don't ignore them, we should never dismiss a promise that God gave. Philippians 4:7 promises a peace. So when you read a promise, there is a promise of peace along with that. Just settle that. Don't let anybody knock you off of that. You can look at them and just smile. Those of you that have or have had teenagers, you know the smile. They're not listening to a thing you said, but they're smiling and nodding their head. Guys, don't make me pick on you. We do that with wives sometimes. Yeah. Huh? What'd you say? So we're going to dismiss. Next week will be part 2 of what do you expect? And we'll finish everything out. If you subscribe to the channel, again, those of you that are watching online, you can get a notice when this comes up and when it comes on Sunday mornings. And then all of the live streams are saved. I have those set to save into the video library so you can go right back through these messages and study them, look at them, and make sure that you understand them so that your life gets to the point where the supernatural is just you. You walk into a room and everybody gets that positive expectation because you're there and supernatural is going to happen. And that is my desire for you, Irresistible. So I'm going to turn you over to my beloved, and she's going to close us out as only she can. and she has no idea what she's doing, so it's going to be fun.
I never know what I'm going to say. Well, he's going to say through me. That was a good line, being fully persuaded. And I look at that being fully persuaded to trust God, fully persuaded to believe his promises, fully persuaded to go to him first when you have issues or problems. Or are we fully persuaded to share it with everybody else first? When we want to see a change happen, a positive change, we want to see the miraculous happen, we want to see a miracle take place, we have to be fully persuaded that God will do it. It's just like Noah building the ark. When I talked about that a little earlier, God told him what to do, and he went out and he found the correct wood. There's a special wood that he had to find. Did you know that? He just didn't go cut down any tree. And he had special tar that he had to get to hold everything together so it wouldn't leak. He had to be fully persuaded to trust God. He had to be fully persuaded to know him, to know his Lord, to be able to do that. He had to be fully persuaded to know God, because when the scoffers came and they were laughing at him and making fun of him, do you know how hard that is when your friends come up to you and tell you that you're stupid or you're an idiot or you can't do something, or, when people tell you that? And what did he do? He kept on working. He kept on nailing the nails and painting the tar and looking for the animals, and he kept on. And then he said again, let the rain do the talking. Let the rain do the talking. So I would encourage you this week, let the rain do the talking. You go forward, you step forward with Jesus Christ. You do what he's told you to do. You seek him, you love him, you follow him, you trust him, you pray to him, you talk to him, you worship him, and you will see a major change take place. You will see things come together. You will see things happen in a positive way. You'll see your miracles. What's your miracle? What are you waiting on? What are you expecting? And that's how you do it. Let's stand to our feet. We're going to pray out of here. I'm going to go ahead and sign you off and let you go. And I thank you for joining us. If this ministry blesses you, we'd love to have you donate or give your tithe or give an offering to us. You can find all the information on the site, on our web pages. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Be blessed. You are loved, and expect a miracle. So, Father God, we just thank you right now for this word.